and I would like to describe about his brief profile. Dr. Bilal is the founder of the International Open University, or IOU, centered in Doha, Qatar, and he is a Jamaican Canadian Islamic scholar, and he completed a Bachelor of Art from the Islamic University of Medina, a Master of Arts from King Saud University in Riyadh, and a PhD in Islamic Theology from the University of Wales, UK. And most of all, his greatest achievement, and the one for which he was listed in the Jordanian publication, is called the 500 Most Influential Muslims. And this is his historic founding of a mega university from Doha, Qatar, now known as the International Open University, which has over 650,000 students registered from over 200 different countries around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Abu Aminah Bilal Philips. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Doctor.
Walaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
This is an honor to have you here. How are you doing, Doctor?
Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Barakallahu fikum. And I pray everyone present, along with yourself, are also fine.
All right. So you're ready to deliver the presentation
on Islamization in education.
All right. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is Dr. Abu Aminah Bilal Philips. Doctor, please take your time.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. As the topic of our program or our conference has been stated as the Islamization in education, or Islamization of education, I would just like to briefly touch on the definition of what is education. And after having looked through a number of different encyclopedias, dictionaries, etc., you could say that everywhere I found a definition, it varied from the others. So I couldn't find a single uniform definition which always was used by the various texts which tried to explain education. But the one definition which I found quite at the point, we could say, or on the point in that case, in the case of of education, what does education mean, was the one which said that education was the way by which a civilization conveys its culture to the next generation. The way by which a civilization conveys its culture to the next generation. I'm just repeating that so that can sink in. Now, what we're talking about here is the conveyance of culture. That this was the essence of what education was and is. So when we talk about westernized education, this is Western civilization conveying its culture through the educational means and processes, etc. So this is what we are challenged to tackle in our times. Of course, there were times before us when Islam was at its peak, during what were the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages of Europe, etc. Knowledge was flourishing, in the various Muslim centers of learning, Baghdad, and Andalusia, etc., Timbuktu. And what we are faced with today, the scholars of the past, they gathered the existing knowledge and built on that knowledge. And that has been the process from civilization to civilization in our history. What we have today is the accumulated knowledge of thousands and thousands of generations of human beings. And this is what distinguishes us from the rest of the creatures that Allah has created in this world. They can't pass on the knowledge. You teach a dog tricks, and he's able to jump in the air, catch frisbees, he's able to do all kinds of things. But he can't pass on what he has learned to his children. You have to teach them all over again each time. Well, in the case of human beings, we are able to build on the knowledge that we have acquired during our time. And that knowledge can be passed on to the next generation, and they can use it directly, which is found in the basic concept, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah taught Adam and Eve the knowledge of everything, the names of everything, names representing knowledge, because it's not just the name, as we have names, but the names of the trees, the grass, the fruit, the rivers, and the knowledge that came along with that, necessary for human beings at that stage of their existence to live a life pleasing to Allah. Like Adam and Eve, the whole garden was there for them except one tree. So the knowledge should guide us to benefit from all the other trees and to avoid that one tree, specified, that one tree which Allah has forbidden for us. Now, in looking at the educational, because we're talking about Islamization in education, the educational process, if we look at it in our basic school systems, kindergarten to grade 12 and beyond, but if we look at it primarily in our kindergarten to grade 12, the information which is being passed on currently through the various textbooks, etc., which have been produced in large quantities, variety of designs and images and all kinds of things. We are tasked with conveying that knowledge along with our culture to the next generation. Now, I'm focusing on the undergraduate or before university level, as this is the common struggle that we face all over the world. Because now all of the textbooks that we have all been westernized. They're under Western civilization's culture, which in this point in time is a secular culture. And the previous speaker spoke at length about various aspects of this secularization of knowledge and education. So there have been many conferences before, back in the late 70s, early 80s, on Islamization of knowledge. And in Mecca, where major conferences were held, material was gathered from the various lectures and presentations which were given to the attendees, and an encyclopedia was put together, 10 or 12 volumes, based on the papers, the works, etc., which were done by the scholars at that point. Dr. Ismail Farouqi was one of the leading figures in this Islamization of knowledge approach. Was his writings, his lectures, etc., which came through that, have benefited generations that came after him. However, what is the reality today is that those conferences which were held back in the late 70s, early 80s, which compiled a body of knowledge today, this is not accessible to the teaching staff of schools around the world, Muslim schools around the world. It's not available to them. Nobody even knows about it. Because to some degree, it was more philosophical than it was practical. Of course, the intent of the philosophers to look into new approaches to understanding what is really mathematics, what is this, and sciences and social sciences, etc. They were tasked with that. What I would like to present as a model for Islamization of or in education for schools, and this can be extrapolated to universities, etc. But first and foremost, we should understand that school, and what is a school? A school is as good as its owner. Because most of the Muslim schools, Islamic schools around the world, they're owned by individuals. Now, if the owner was strictly a businessman, he or she, including businesswomen, he or she would have seen an opportunity as a business person in the community to do good business. People need education. So let's set up an institution as a business, make some money. No harm. No harm. However, if the person's perception, that owner of the school's perception, is merely making money, we've got problems. That the school should be profitable is important, because how will it sustain itself? So that side, from a business side, needs to be there. However, that school will not be an Islamic school, right? We will not have Islamization in education in that school, because the owner will give precedence to making profits over what is right. So, very important step in terms of educational institutions is that those people who found them, who established them, should have the right intentions. Innamal a'mal bin niyat. We all know that. As the Prophet ﷺ was quoted as saying, deeds are according to their intentions. They will be judged according to their intentions. So that owner who is strictly a businessman, that's what concerns him or her most, when they have to get a principal for the school, they will go and try and find the cheapest principal, because it's business. The more you have to pay the principal, the less your profits become. So if you can find one at a cheap price, then you're sailing. However, that one who came at the cheap price may not be good, may not be properly qualified. And that's who you're putting to head the school. What's going to happen after that? So here's the problem. To set up an Islamic school for Islamization in education, we have to start at the root. Those who establish the school, they have to have the right intention. Their intention should be to please Allah, first and foremost. After that, yes, that it be sound from a business perspective. It's not incurring losses, and it is affordable for the community so that they can benefit from it. Because if you put it out of the range of their affordability, then we're cutting off chunks of our country's youth from getting access to Islamized education. So pillar number one, the owner. Pillar number two, the principal. The principal, having chosen a principal who is Islamically conscious and understands his or her responsibility, then we move on to the teaching staff. Similarly, they are chosen based on their proper understanding of Islam, proper practice of Islam, and their skills, that they are properly qualified to deliver the knowledge which has been placed in their hands to the students of the school. In fact, we could even go on to the janitorial services in the school. People who sweep, wash, prepare, they should also be Islamically conscious. Meaning that if in the school they see some child doing something which is not appropriate, they stop them, warn them, inform the administration if they continue. It's their duty. They don't see it as, oh, this is my job, is just to clean this place. Whatever the kids are doing, not on me. That's their problem. I'll just keep cleaning. No. We want even the cleaner to be Islamically conscious. So we have a structure, a superstructure, which is Islamically sound. So in that, we bring in our students, and then we have to convey to them Islamized knowledge. But that's what they're there for Islamized knowledge. Now, going back, the teachers, we're not going to ask those teachers to go back to the late 70s and get that encyclopedia, which was put together in Mecca, and study it and come back, as scholars of Islamization of knowledge. What we have in front of us right now are qualified teachers, etc., who, by delivering the material which they are presented with to their students in an Islamized way, have Islamized the educational process in that school. Towards that end, I proposed 5 principles that need to be addressed and through which Islamized education may be achieved. The first principle is class and school environment. In the school, we have classrooms, hallways, offices, etc. This environment itself in the school should be Islamized. And one of the biggest and easiest ways to Islamize is through images. We have paintings, posters around the school that convey an Islamic message, not just to beautify the school, painting, carving, all these other kinds of things. As Muslims, the primary purpose should be to convey a message. As one of the Chinese philosophers had said, or was supposed to have said, one picture is worth 1,000 words. So every picture that we put up in that school, in the classrooms, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, and we should vary them from time to time, every one of them should be conveying a visual message of Islam to the students. So the environment of the classroom, the school, etc., should be itself Islamized. For example, there is a standard chart which is used in the early grades, grade 1, 2, for teaching body parts. Teaching body parts. The head, the hand, the knee, the foot, the eyes, the ear, etc. And it's a picture of a little boy with his hands out, wearing underwear. And this is what is used. If you go to any shop which specializes in school materials, that's the standard picture you'll see. Of course, in India, the little boy looks like an Indian. In China, the little boy looks like a Chinese. Various countries, Europeans, etc. So that's varied. But the basic picture is that of this boy there in his underwear. So what do we do here? Our art department should be tasked with taking that picture and give the boy proper clothing, at least covering his navel to his knee, because we know that's aura. Of course, for the little kids, grade 1, grade 2, it's not, but we train them visually and physically. We train them to be Islamically conscious in that sense. So they should feel shy to wear, underwear and just walk around in the public. That's one thing in the home, etc., but limited areas of the home, etc. But that picture, our art department, and many schools that try to establish, Islamization of the educational process in their schools, what they do is they cancel the art department. Because art, where does art take us? Takes us into the curses of Allah, right? Because of the curse on those who make images. But the point is that those images can be Islamic just as well as they can be un-Islamic. And we need an art department. Children like to draw, color, all these things. This is part of their nature. So what we should instead do is get a conscious art teacher and assistants, etc. The Department of Art in the school are conscious Muslims. So wherever it is needed, like that chart for the body parts, to Islamize it, a kufi is put on the kid's head. It doesn't have to be, but I'm just saying. But aura between navel and knee is covered. and then the body parts are named. So this is a visual image. I mean, of course, schools go on. People have grown up with seeing the little naked boy, or half naked, 3/4 naked, and people ignored it, but it's stuff going into their heads. Later on, when you try to tell them, listen, your shorts are too short, you're showing your thigh and your belly button, and so what? Big deal. Because they've seen enough of it, and nobody has corrected for them that shouldn't be. So the image in the classroom, and especially those first early grades, lower kindergarten, upper kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, many images are used. So we should always keep in mind that every image that we produce and put up anywhere in the school, it should have an Islamic message behind it. That's the Islamization of educational artwork of the school. Of course, the other aspects, of greeting each other Islamically, and when you sneeze, say Alhamdulillah, and all the different Islamic cultural practices should be established in the classroom there by conscious Muslim qualified teachers. The second principle is what I refer to as historical relevance. That one of the problems that we're faced with today is that we have been cut off from our roots. All the books, texts, etc., which come to us today when we are produced in the West, and they have ignored Muslims' contributions to civilization. It is as if we never existed. So our children grow up, go through school, graduate. If you ask them who was Sir Isaac Newton, they'll tell you. Einstein, they'll tell you. Madame Curie, they'll tell you. They know all these people. But if you ask them who is Al-Hassan ibn al-Haytham, so who? Is he like Zidane, the football player? Is he on the same team with Zidane? Zainuddin Zaidan? They have no idea. The geniuses, Muslim geniuses in the fields of science, optics, all the various fields, who made their contributions, we have no knowledge of them. So we are tied directly to the Western scientists, etc., who made their contributions also. But we are never told that they got that knowledge from Spain. They used to go to Spain and study under the Muslim scholars and take it back, put their names on it, and that's what we know. So we need to bring our students back in touch with their heritage. It's an issue of heritage. If we can't identify with that heritage, then we will identify with the heritage of today from the West. That westernized secular educational heritage is what we will take on and become. So very important for us whenever we're dealing with any field of science, etc., it is important for us to connect that with what Muslims have contributed to these various fields. A book called 1001 Muslim Inventions was produced earlier in the 21st century from an exhibition which had taken place in London. It's beautifully done. Every school should have that book in their library. In the classrooms, students can always refer back to it. And it should be referred to, connecting us with our heritage. So we don't feel as if Islam has never and has nothing to offer. It's all coming from the West, from Greece and Rome, their heritage, European heritage. But Muslim, who knows? The third area is to add to whatever class that is being taught a short verse from the Quran. Said in Arabic, but explained in the language, English, if you're teaching an English medium, and Urdu, if you're teaching in Urdu or whatever. But an ayah should come up in every class. Short. We don't give them a big, long passage, ayah, longest ayahs in the Quran. We have, some pretty long ayahs that are longer than surahs. No, we pick for them something short from the Quran, short and relevant. Relevant to whatever class you're teaching. What does that do? Well, it gives the student a sense that the Quran is relevant. What is the big sickness that we have today around the Muslim world? Muslims are reading the Quran and don't even understand what it says. It's just ritual reading, covering, putting on a high place, kissing it when it falls on the ground. Well, we've invented all kinds of practices around the Quran, which were not from the Sunnah at all. What we have to focus on is the meaning of the Quran itself and the context that we're using it in for the teachers to be able to convey to the students this connection between the students and Quran, to rebuild that link. The third principle is hadithic, from the Sunnah, that we should give them a hadith relevant to the class that is being taught. And in this process, we are educating them to be connected with the Quran and understand that the Quran is relevant to us even today. Though it was revealed 1,400 years ago, regardless, it is still relevant today. Similarly with the Sunnah, because much of our societies have strayed far away from the actual teachings of the Sunnah. Reconnect them so that they don't think that Islam is not relevant. Oh, it's okay for the mosque, but after that, no place for Islam. No. Let the students learn through this process that the Quran and the Sunnah are relevant. They were relevant and they will always be relevant. So this is Islamization of education. That's the educational process. And the last principle is the moral message. And this is perhaps of greatest importance, that in every class, a moral message should be given, relevant to what the students are taking. Don't make the moral message something not related at all to what the class was about. But no, this moral message should be integrated inside of that class so the students don't feel like this is something separate from our class. So the message should contain an Islamic moral principle in order for the moral character of the students to be sound when they graduate. As the Prophet ﷺ had said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect for you the highest of moral character traits. The Prophet ﷺ taught morality. That is foundational to education. And what has happened in our times is that education became secularized. Morality was removed from the classroom because morality in the West came from the Bible, and they put the Bible aside and said, we have a democratic process in which we will use to decide what's right and what's wrong. So we need to fix that. We have been inundated with it, and we need to correct that. This is Islamization in the educational process. We're bringing morality back into the classroom. And can you imagine, right now, the countries which have the worst standing as being the most corrupt countries, the top 10 countries in the world, which are considered to be the most corrupt by researchers, half of them are Muslim countries. We're among the top. We shouldn't be. Our morality defined us to the rest of the world. It was what brought many people into Islam without any fighting. Our morality. So we have to bring that morality back into the classroom so that the child from lower kindergarten till they graduate in grade 12, they have been receiving moral messages, indoctrination. Yes, moral messages have been passed on all the way through. So when that student graduates, do you think you can bribe him or her? No. No. Their moral compass will be fixed. Clear. They will spot anytime something is not, halal, really sounds, but something wrong here, they'll see it right away. That's what we want. Graduates who graduate with high moral standing, which will make them capable of changing the world. As Allah had put on us, إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. People will not be changed or change their circumstances until they change themselves. So this is the process. Islamization in education should be a changing process. Changing those who are exposed to that education into and turning them into, metamorphosing them into proper Muslim educated members of society. So these basically are the 5 principles. And of course, these 5 principles are just ones I set. Maybe you can find a 6th, maybe you can find a 7th or others, or you want to only work with 3. It's up to you. But this message, which I call LPI or Lesson Plan Islamization, begins with the lesson plans themselves. So teachers who are properly Islamically conscious, etc., they should be required to put in every lesson plan that they prepare how they would be implementing all or at least 1 or 2 of these principles in every lesson. The moral message, that one is without question. That needs to be there. Of course, mathematics teachers would ask me, how do you Islamize 2 + 2 = 4? I mean, that's just straightforward. I said to them, well, you tell them, when you pray Fajr, right? Before Fajr, you have Sunnah. And the Sunnah consists of how many rak'at? 2. And the Fard consists of how many rak'at? 2. So what's the total number of rak'at that you do? 4. Okay, I'm just giving this as a simple example. It can go way beyond that. But there is room. Where there is a will, there's a way. If we dedicate ourselves as educators, then all that I have presented would be integrated and a part of what you would convey as instructors to the Ummah. And remember, the teacher and the student are the greatest human individuals in the world. As the Prophet ﷺ had said, "Ad-dunya mal'una." This world is cursed. Mal'unun ma fiha. Everything in it is cursed. Illa dhikrullah. Except for the remembrance of Allah, wa ma wala, and what brings us closer to Allah. Wa aliman wa muta'allima. Scholar, the teacher, and the student. Barakallahu feekum. I hope and pray that the message was clear and was of benefit for those who are attending this webinar, seminar, inshallah.
MashaAllah, thank you very much, Dr. Bilal Philips, for the wonderful presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, following that, I would like to inform you that if you want to have authentic Islamic knowledge with Dr. Bilal, you can join IOU, International Open University, through the website iou.edu.gm. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the question and answer session. So as we can see on the on the screen, it has been accumulated a number of questions, but I will have to say that we have limited time here, so we will try our best to provide the best explanation from our speakers today. So I will go first with the question 1. How is the science of Al-Quran therapy in medicine for the healing physical and can you
Okay.
physical and psychological?
Okay, no problem. Just
maybe for the first question we can address to
you
Professor.
wanted to address them all at once or just one by one so that we save time?
Maybe we can
okay, let's start with number 1, just a general comment. I think our brother is talking about how do we use the Islamic therapy or the Quranic guidance on handling the physical and psychological issues and problems. I think if I look at it from the perspective of Islamization, of psychology, for example, before we reach the level of using the Islamic guidance, the Islamic views on this part, we need to do the if you wanted to do the process of Islamization of this side, I think there are several steps to be done from looking at the current secular psychology in all its branches, and also counseling and therapy, so that you understand what they have and what techniques they use for this, and then you come in and you see what the Quran provides. I think looking at it from the Quranic perspective, we have in the Quran itself a lot of ways how we create that personality and soul of tranquility, how we create balanced mental health, psychological health. There are a lot of things in Islam and basically relate to our way of ibadah and our relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are many things which people see that they are simple, and some of them maybe just they say like rituals. And that's one of our problem in understanding the Quran. A concept like istighfar or as-salat ala Rasul or dua, or these things all can be transformed into very dynamic and important tools and ways how to medicate our soul, ourselves. The Quran, shifa lima fi nufus, and that's true, and that's proven. I don't want to lengthen the answer, but I wanted to say that in the tradition of Islam also we have our tasawwuf, particularly the balanced tasawwuf and the akhlaq, the tazkiyah, the tarbiyah ruhiyya, tarbiyah sulukiyya, tarbiyah jasadiyya, and we can learn from the prophetic tradition and all this. But if I look at your question from an Islamization perspective, there is a process to be undertaken so that we can introduce the Islamic therapy. We can package it, we can prepare it in textbooks, in trainings, in skills, teaching. I think in IIUM here, we have now some specialists in training people in this psychological and mental healing and also Islamic therapy. And they have, in fact, under my department here, there is one new manual introduced. They call it Guideline to Mental and Spiritual Health. It's like in the form of spiritual steps and so on and so forth to help the people. But in the end, we can say that the Quran is shifa, and we need to do the ulama and the specialists, the psychologists and the others, they need to be able to benefit from those things and transform them, translate them into practical packages, practices, ibadah. And I think as Dr. Bilal mentioned, I think always the situation will be related to an ecosystem and an environment. How do you create the environment, the simple environment where people can live the Islamic? They can see it, they can practice it, they can see it in their friends, in their colleagues, in their teacher. So the environment creates impacts. I think that's what I wanted to say regarding this first question. And also it's related to what should be done by lecturers and students in providing the miracles of the Quran. This is another different question, means how do you deal with the Quran as a book that provides you a methodology, that provides you an understanding how you explain to people science or scientific phenomenon, or how do you explain the Sunnah of Allah, the ayah of Allah. And in this regard, we can in fact use the current natural science, social science, human sciences, and the discoveries of science in biology, in brain studies, in artificial intelligence. All this can be help to, in fact, show that the Islamic teaching and the Quranic teachings are important. I give you just last thing here. Imam Sa'id Nursi, our scholar, in one of his Rasail al-Nur, he was mentioning that humanity towards the end of life and all this, humanity will lean towards knowledge, towards science, towards ilm. And at that time, ilm and knowledge and sciences will become another evidence of Islam. So I think it's a matter of us discovering the methodology of the Quran and explaining, and the Quran never tells us don't use science or don't benefit from all this phenomenon, or in fact, if I may say, science itself is one approach to understanding the universe. But unfortunately, that approach has some problems, some shortcomings. The Quran provides a much more comprehensive method and approach to understand the self, the universe, and how to relate yourself with them. This is for the first two questions.
All right, thank you so much for the answers. I hope it satisfies the to us. And now maybe we can go to the question number 4 for Dr. Bilal to answer. All right, we can see on the screen the question. So, Dr. Bilal, take your time.
Everybody is able to see these questions. If everybody is able to see it, then I don't need to repeat what is there. But the main point that is being raised here, that the biggest obstacles that I see is the administration. She teaches, or he teaches in a school, that the administration of the school are non-practicing Muslims. They're Muslims in name or whatever, you know, and the secular ideas and ideals are being spread in the school. Islamic goals are not nowhere to be found, and the way in which it is the school is implemented, its practices, you know, is not conducive to produce proper Muslim students. And well, I agree with you 100%. If the administration of the school is not practicing, they don't care, you know, it's just Muslim in name, because it was a good business opportunity for the business people who set it up, then this is the consequence. But at the same time, what do? Still, the principles which I outlined, you can implement it to the degree that you're able in your class. Because Allah will only hold you accountable for what you're able to do. You are not in the administration. You cannot change the whole school like that. No, but at least you do your part, you know, so that at the end of the day, you can feel Allah is pleased with me. What I've done for these students, you know, is the best that I could. So, I mean, of course, Allah doesn't treat any of us unfairly. وَلَا يَظْلُمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. This is Allah's promise. He will not oppress any of us. So the circumstance that you're in, you are required to do the best you can Islamically, given the circumstances that you found yourself in. And those principles, which I mentioned, I had them implemented in schools in Chennai, India. I spent a year there in Chennai and worked with the Muslim schools there. Many of the times the teaching staff were non-Muslims, etc. But by discussing with them and explaining, even they were involved in conveying the moral message in their classrooms, etc. You know, because of course, morality is something that all good people recognize. You know, so much of what is required could even be done by non-Muslims. Although preferably in your school, if it's supposed to be a Muslim school, the vast majority of the staff should be Muslim, practicing Muslims.
All right, thank you so much for the explanation, Doctor. And now, as we still have about 10 minutes to end this session, we will have Professor to answer the question.
Can I just see that question? Question number 3 here. This is this is a very important question. In fact, I think what Dr. Bilal was explaining at the educational level, at the tarbiyah level, at the practical level is very important. And in fact, Islamization of knowledge should end up there, end up in providing practical solutions to education, to all other aspects of our life, from parenting to education to economics to that's in fact what we are aiming for. But unfortunately, some of our processes of Islamization, they took a long time, the theoretical level of the epistemology and methodology and so on and so forth. Now, to answer this question here, as I mentioned in the presentation, things, I think, in society, things are dynamic. You don't wait for this process until it ends and then you go to the second or you go to the other process. No. If we are able to do things simultaneously and in balance, it will be great, because our society is dynamic, and maybe some civil society groups, some private universities, some they can do, and they can advance certain areas of Islamization of curriculum, Islamization of science, of psychology, and they can provide alternatives, practical alternatives. That will be very great. But what I try to mention here is that because of the challenge the intellectual challenge put by the Western civilization, by producing all this body of knowledge and all these applications in all areas of life, based on that worldview, the Islamic civilization need to respond intellectually also, so that we bring our worldview, our epistemology, our methodology, and our application and alternative to the fore, so that people can see that there is alternative. Because many of this Western knowledge in human science and social science, they go against the core of human values, against the core of religion, against the core of fitrah, against the core of Sunnah. So what we are trying to do to bring that Islamic knowledge that shows that we can create a balanced understanding, a balanced worldview, and so on and so forth. But all this, what we are producing, need to go down into the process of education, acculturation, culture, society, so that we create that bigger environment which understands Islam and implements Sharia naturally, normally. But to reach that level, I think we need these processes. If we can implement Islamization of the self, Islamization of knowledge, Islamization of tarbiyah, Islamization of society, of economy, it's great. We go on, we provide alternatives, we provide practices. Because if we just keep talking about Islam as a great epistemology, great methodology, but we cannot translate into methods and then applications and then solutions, we will, so there is no need for us to wait until we create all this, then we can tell people, oh yeah, we got a good example of how we educate primary school people or second. No, we try whatever thing we have based on our understanding of the Quran and Sunnah and Islamic practices, we do. But these intellectual groups of Islamization, elites, scholars, researchers, they should gear up their work to help also the Ummah. So we work all together. The last thing I wanted to say regarding the, I know that there are other groups, they also criticize the Western model of knowledge, like you mentioned here, post-colonial groups and all this. Yes, I think there is no issue to have other nations, other people, other worldviews also giving their inputs on this Western positivistic model. There is no harm. What is important is how Islam provides that integrated approach to knowledge, to education, to psychology, to human science. To me, we should be starting from the Quran, from the Sunnah, from the legacy that we have, and build our framework, our understanding. I think the Quran is not my word, my kalam, or is not the kalam of Rasulullah. It is the kalam of Allah. Allah knows what is psychology, what is sociology, what is a human, what is universe, what is jinn, what is malaika. And when he put in the Quran all these laws and sunan and sharia, and all put with hikmah and the implementation, the proper implementation of those things, for sure, they create hayatun tayyiba, good life. But the issue rests now on us as Muslims, whether we understand the integrated, comprehensive epistemology, methodology, akhlaq, value system, sharia, and or not. So I think that's what I wanted to comment on this. We need to go on, and each group working in any area, whether theoretical, practical, in the field, in political, in education, you go on. What is important is we always reference ourselves to the Quran and Sunnah and the great practices of this civilization of Islam, while benefiting from other civilizations.
MashaAllah.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor. And now for the last 5 minutes, we will have Dr. Bilal to answer question number 5 and 6.
Well, number 5 is stating that the Islamization of education or in education that I was referring to depends on the existence of a liberal space that gives autonomy to Muslims to develop schools with their own curriculum. No, it's not limited there. You do of it what you can. This is the reality. If you're allowed to do more, because some countries have different policies regarding what is taught. We're not talking about taking different textbooks from which a state or a country has decided that these are the standard textbooks we need to be taught. You teach those same textbooks, but how you teach the textbook in your lesson plan, you teach the same material is there, but you now integrate Islam into the various elements of that teaching process. So obviously, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're in where the Uyghurs are, where their schools have been taken away from them, and their culture is just being eradicated, the Islamic elements of it in one way or another, all kinds of things that they're going through right now. I mean, of course, obviously, it's going to be very difficult there. But, we're talking about the majority of the places in the world, where Muslims are able to set up schools and run them and utilize these principles to benefit the community. The person says here, but the situation, in my opinion, is more complex than such a liberal situation. It can be said that there is an anti-liberal tendency on the ground of anti-radicalism and anti-terrorism, etc., etc. How can Islamization be carried out in such a situation? As I explained, you do from it what you're able to do. Allah doesn't hold you accountable for what you're not able to do. So some elements of it can be done. And if you find in your school situation you can't do any of this, then that's the time for hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ, explained hijrah. When his time ran out in Mecca, he had to make hijrah. He went to Medina. So that's the time. That's the signal. Allah is telling you time to pack up and move. So otherwise, there's always, in most places that I've been to, and I've been all over the world, people are able to do this. It's possible. So to different levels. But as I said, even working with non-Muslim teachers, it's possible for them to do it as I outlined it. The second question, after listening to your speech, what is the criteria of Islamic school? Well, basically, I laid it out already. You should have an owner who is starting this institution to serve Allah. That's his ibadah. He knows, he looks at it as ibadah. And in the same way that we treat our ibadah, we have to, make wudu properly. Not just any old wudu, leaving parts of your wudu not done, etc. No, not acceptable. You have to do properly. So similarly, that person in worshiping Allah through the setting up of the school, he makes sure that he gets the top principle. who is properly qualified, Islamically conscious, etc., and he makes sure that that principal now will make sure that the teachers that he hires or she hires are Islamically conscious, and so on and so forth. So if at each of those levels we have people who are Islamically conscious and dedicated, then we can do wonders. And I've seen, alhamdulillah, schools in different parts of the world, whether in Bangladesh, in the Philippines, in Guyana, South America, so where, people have striven and done wonderful things, wonders in our times, because, the availability and accessibility of knowledge today, far exceeds what it was 50 years ago. So, alhamdulillah, I feel happy with how things are developing, because a lot of people say, we are in the worst of times. Now it's the worst. The Muslims are this, that, and but it's, you need to find a stone and hide underneath it. No, go back 50 years, go back 100 years. Look at where Muslims were then. We are far ahead of where we were. No, these are some of the best times of the latter times. Obviously, I'm not talking about the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu is the best of all times, but and the early generations. But after that, things went down. Some came up for a while, went down again, and up, and that's how life is. So we are in a time where it is possible in most countries to Islamize your educational institutions. Just be conscious of all of these elements which are critical for the development, psychological, spiritual, physiological development of the students, because they are our products. This is what we are, hired for creating a generation which is like the generation of the Sahaba, one of stern people who are sternly on the truth, standing, firmly. And just as a last point, having visited Muslim schools, as I said, in Mindanao, Philippines, Malaysia, Bangladesh, in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, where I'm based now, across to America, US, Canada, going down to West Indies, South America. And in each of these schools that I visited, I would ask the students of grade 11 and 12, graduating students, I'd ask them one question. I would ask them, do you consider yourselves to be true Muslim students? And they inevitably, all of them raise their hands. Yes, we're all true Muslim students. I say, but okay, that's a claim. We have a test, a litmus test, to determine how truthful your claim is. So I say to them, of course, I remind them what's a litmus test. They all know it. Anyway, then I say to them, okay, now I want you all to raise your hands, right? And say after me, Wallahi, I have never cheated on any test or examination in my school career. All the hands down immediately. That's the proof. That's the proof. Sometimes the principals who will be with me, they will
I'm sorry, we have reached the time limit for question and answer session. Maybe you can have the final statement.
Final statements? I was making my final statement. Anyway, the point is that we have a job to do. Allah has blessed us to be conscious and put us in positions where we are involved in educating the next generation, passing on that culture, the cultural package, which includes everything of Islam in it. We ask Allah to give us success in these types of endeavors. And of course, we should always try to do our utmost best, knowing that this education, the teaching and the learning, this is a part of ibadah. And those who are on that path of knowledge are on a path to paradise, as the Prophet ﷺ told us. Barakallahu feekum. Professor Berg, final statement?
Yeah, I thought you will be the final. Okay. May Allah bless you all. I think this was a wonderful session with our participant here. I think what is important to all of us here is to understand that the Quran is our point of reference. You want an epistemology? Quran. You want a methodology? Quran. You want guidance? Is in the Quran. And I think with this understanding, we can make big difference in our life and in the life of other people. Islam and Islamic worldview has proved earlier that it can establish a balanced civilization. We can do it again, inshallah, with great souls, great minds and hearts and great people.
All right. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.